So please look around the room, see who's here, say hello, wave, stretch, readjust. I'm not sure who's counting heads in the chapel. We have 25 online, and I'm hoping somebody has counted in the room for me. So welcome, everybody. We're only 18 days into the new year, so we can probably still say Happy New Year. Probably most of us haven't seen each other in the new year, so I'm glad everybody's here. So my name is Thia Powers, and I'm your Dharma leader for the evening. We are at Insight Meditation Community of Charlotte. And tonight, the topic that I thought worthy for us, for our time, is the topic of happiness. Since we all want to be happy. And I think that this is such a rich topic. When I started delving into it, I had a hard time reining it in. I had to edit a lot of pages. So hopefully what we have is something that you will benefit from. So we'll look at three things tonight. The first thing is, what is happiness? What is it? The second is, how do we cultivate happiness? And the third one is, can happiness last? Is there such a thing as lasting happiness? So let's begin with, what is this elusive thing we call happiness? The common usage of the word happiness is simply the experience of positive or pleasant emotions, ranging from contentment to gratitude to intense joy. And this is often combined with a sense that your life is good, that it's meaningful and worthwhile. A UC Berkeley Greater Good study says, social and cultural factors greatly affect how we think about happiness. People from cultures that embrace more community-oriented ideas think about happiness in subtler terms of harmony and contentment. More individualistic-minded cultures, it makes me think of the US, connect it to feelings of exuberance and joy. Happiness levels are also shaped by our families of origin. It's true that happier people increase the happiness of those around them. Science has found that we do have some control over our happiness factor in life, fairly large portion. And this is part of what we'll be looking at tonight. So people around the world have different ways of thinking about and experiencing happiness in different ways, but most everybody reports happiness is a feeling of generally positive sense of self, and that they're okay with their life overall. In a less widely known usage, the Buddha teaches us that happiness and unhappiness are ephemeral states of mind, and therefore their real causes cannot be found outside the mind. Also, in Buddhism, it's taught that ethical conduct, basically being a person of virtue and good character, is what brings happiness to ourselves and to the people around us. We'd much rather be with a well-behaved person than a person who's out of control and hurting people. So we start here in our training for happiness. We're also instructed that our efforts to train the heart and mind, it's very important that we include others, that we care about the happiness of others and not just our own happiness. This is a huge factor in increasing our own happiness. Buddhism is associated with happiness probably more than any other philosophy of life. According to Buddhist thinking, happiness and sorrow are our own responsibility, and they're mostly within our capacity to cultivate and shape. Buddhist teachings posit that everything comes from mind. It's not what's happening that causes happiness or stress, but how our mind responds to it that determines how we act and eventually feel. Now here, I need to insert a disclaimer. I need to acknowledge that depression and trauma are states of being that are serious challenges to our happiness. And these require counseling, sometimes medication is helpful, and focused strategies can be used to overcome this. So I don't want to trivialize this or overlook the fact that some people may not be advised to begin meditation at this time. But the good news is that the mind has enough neuroplasticity that we can all heal and thrive in ways that we never would have believed possible. So back to the description of happiness. Here are 9 states of heart and mind that we can experience through regular meditation that offer long-term happiness. The first is serenity, being at peace. The second is humility, not needing to feel important. Honesty, living in truthfulness, speaking truthfulness. Equanimity, a calm, even-mindedness. Non-attachment is a big one, the ability to let go, to be generous. And then courage is part of this. We work with the heart a lot in this practice, cultivating a brave heart that can look squarely at the face of adversity and not look away. Contentment is part of it, being okay with life as it is. And innocence, I love that, not losing our sense of wonder. And the last is quiet confidence, an ability to trust in what is true. So one of our jobs here as a Sangha, a group of folks that study and practice the Buddha Dharma together, is to actively cultivate these sources that I just named of peace and happiness, and they're already present within our minds. As teacher and writer Sylvia Boorstein reminds us, happiness is an inside job. As we meditate more, we learn to trust that our challenges often bring unexpected gifts. And we learn to be more tender with ourselves when we're not happy. Sometimes we make the mistake of thinking that we can outsource our happiness to others. It's not someone else's job to make us happy. It's so easy to think that our spouse or our brother or our daughter or our dog should be making us happy. And this is an unstable situation. External circumstances and other people are unpredictable and rarely, if ever, under our control. We're barely under our control. So let go of this idea. I used to get angry every time my mother was late. I would plan something lovely for us to do, and I would go to pick her up, and she would not be anywhere near ready. And this went on for years, and I finally figured out I didn't need to get angry, that I could still be happy, even if she was late. And I began to just trick her into being on time. And we got along great after that. We were even able to laugh about it because she figured out that I was tricking her. When I claim responsibility for my own happiness, it increases my sense of agency in my own life. And we're more in touch with reality this way. It does take effort, though. And fortunately for us, right effort is part of our prescription for happiness that the Buddha gives us, also known as the Noble Eightfold Path. Another word for effort is energy. So how do I skillfully use my energy to create a good life, a satisfying life? Now that we've defined it, how do we cultivate it? We can look to one of the first teachings of the Buddha, traditionally known as the Four Noble Truths, and these are the truth of suffering, the cause of suffering, the fact that things do not have to be this way, which is the third truth, and the last of the four truths sets us on our path to happiness. The last of the Four Noble Truths is the Eightfold Path. So we can start anywhere on this path. Last week, Clyde talked to us about some parts of the path: right speech, right action, and right livelihood, the ethical parts of the path. And the week before that, Larry spoke to us about intention and view and skillful ways to drop things that don't serve us, the renunciation that we all do at the beginning of January and seem to have conveniently forgotten about by the beginning of February. So please don't stress about trying to remember the list of the four truths or the eight parts of the path. These are core teachings that you'll hear over and over, and whatever you need will stick with you. So the factors on the Eightfold Path that I want to talk about tonight are right effort or energy, and practicing mindfulness, and practicing concentration. And so what do these have to do with happiness? Hopefully at the end of the talk, you'll know a little more about that. So let's back up. Here's an interesting part, perhaps the most important part of the talk. In the teachings, we're asked to acknowledge that not being happy or satisfied or content is an undisputable part of being alive. This is known as the First Noble Truth. I love a paradox, and the Buddha Dharma is full of them. So accepting wholeheartedly that we will not always be happy is the first big step to being happy. You have to admit, that's an interesting paradox. I'm asking you to believe if you're not able to believe that if you are not able to admit that you'll not always be happy and really get on board with that, you'll have a hard time being happier. So that's really one very important thing to contemplate. Not being happy or satisfied is just part and parcel of being alive, of the program. And that's one of the things that'll be explored at the residential retreat in April. And then there's a second step that may not matter to you because I've found this was easy to miss. But once I learned to spot it, it was so much simpler to make the turn back towards happiness. So what's the second step? The second step is seeing the desire for things to be different than they are. Like with my mom, just demanding that she be on time when she was never going to be on time. I was clinging to that, and it was making me miserable. So you might think you don't cling, but you know what? We all do. We all do. If we really look at it, we can find ourselves arguing with reality all the time. When we resist what's actually happening, that creates unhappiness. Resistance does that. We get rope burns from it. So am I saying roll over for anything that happens in life? No, I'm not, and we'll get to that caveat in a moment. But I am inviting you to simply notice how many times during the day you feel resistance to something, strong or subtle, that you think, oh, they should be doing it like this, or why can't they be like this? Then I would be happy, if only, if only. I wish it was like this. There's a persistent desire in our lives for things to be different than they actually are. So this was a big aha for me, and I hope that you can track it too, because you'll probably laugh at how often it happens during the day. And like you, I still have preferences. Some are strong, and I find myself working with them frequently. This world does not operate according to my ideas and my particular values. It never will. My own household does not operate according to my values and preferences, so I adjust and adjust and adjust again. But sometimes I argue. Anger, blaming, and even delusion can result when we're unable to be flexible, with our expectations about the way things are. And we don't want to cultivate that. That's wasted time. That's inflexibility. And so flexibility is the way to create and increase happiness. So after we have first accepted that we will probably not always be happy, and then through a flexible attitude, let go of clinging and wanting things to be different, we've already made huge progress in cultivating happiness. And we get to do this over and over and over again. This is our practice. So these are the reasons we suffer. We don't acknowledge that unhappiness is part of life. We don't anticipate it. And then when it happens, we keep wanting it not to happen. We cling and crave. And this continuously happens with our jobs, our families, our pets, our friends. And we're on a wild ride of highs and lows. Things are going my way, they're not going my way. Oh, that disappointed me. This is wonderful. So it's all what causes us to be tossed about by external circumstances. And so the crux of this talk is that the Buddha taught that happiness and unhappiness are simply states of mind. And so the real causes are in here, cannot be found outside the heart and mind. Our minds are the cause of not being happy, and so we need to learn different ways of responding. We need to train our minds. Debbie posted a few days ago on the GroupMe chat, we meditate so our minds do not complicate our lives. We meditate so our minds do not complicate our lives. So let me quickly mention here that the flip side of acceptance is the fact that occasionally we do need to modify things instead of just accepting them. We need to reschedule appointments, trade in unreliable cars, sometimes even restructure a whole relationship. We modify our lives in large and small ways that hopefully are reasonable and better for everybody involved. So when I say work on accepting what is, it's more about work on accepting the things that you cannot change and have the wisdom to know the difference. Another important thing about happiness that's worth our time tonight is categories of happiness. Let's take a look at some of the many, many sources for our happiness. So for me, the first thing that came to mind was a slice of key lime pie. That is a large source of happiness. Food is probably one of the most popular and easily obtained sources of happiness. Alcohol falls into this category. A nice glass of French wine, a cold beer. It seems like there's a brewery on every corner now from time to time. Also, we can list clothing, furniture, technology, cars. All that stuff can go into this first category that we'll call consumables. And any of these can spin into strong and unhealthy cravings, clinging even, which can result in credit card debt, addiction, and health issues. Not only that, these things fade pretty fast. They're impermanent. The car gets dinged up, the technology is already out of date within months, and then we're hungry or thirsty again. So consumable kinds of pleasure are fleeting and are managed with moderation for best results. A second kind of happiness is achievements. Doing something we love and are good at brings us deep satisfaction, and we get double happiness points if it helps others in the process. So this kind of activity focuses on a skill set, and excelling in that skill usually brings us recognition. It makes us happy. We get rewards like a paycheck or accolades or raises and esteem from our colleagues and community. And for this reason, it's easily connected directly to our sense of self, who we think that we are, have built ourselves to be. And this is not wrong, but it's only a small part of the big picture. The Nobel Prizes and the badges of honor from people pursuing their achievements with passion are a result of this sort of energy and happiness. It raises the bar high for doing stuff we love. And although this is good, maybe we can recognize too, it's only a part of the bigger story of who we really are. I also think I would be remiss if I didn't say that we can also get happiness from extremely simple things. Recently, I was helping a friend rearrange her porch furniture, and we opened a box, and there were hundreds of ladybugs in the box, holding very still. We took them out into the sunshine, set the box down, and they all began to take flight in the sun, little polka dotted red bugs flying all around us and landing in our hair. And it was such a beautiful moment with us laughing and picking ladybugs out of each other's hair and watching them nestle into the bushes and flowers. That was a very happy moment that's going into my happiness bank, something that I'll remember over and over. So the last category of happiness is purpose. Remember that book? It was a long time ago, The Purpose-Driven Life. I didn't read it, but the title stuck with me because this particular kind of happiness plugs us into something that's much bigger than we are. It touches our values and it informs our ethics. Building houses for Habitat for Humanity or being a part of serving children and families are good examples. Creating public art and beauty is a nice example. And being an active part of groups that operate for the benefit of the greater good is a high form of happiness. With purpose, we come most alive and often even forget ourselves. Serving others in this way feeds our innate desire to be good, to help each other, and to focus on and explore what truth means to each of us. So to be able to live into that is a high, high level of happiness because essentially we are good. And this is when we're tapping into our essential nature. This high happiness, as I call it, is actually a ground of being. Now we're getting into inexhaustible sources of happiness. These are known as the Brahma Viharas. This is where we're feeling love and expressing kindness, operating from joy, compassion, and equanimity. This is the fuel for long-lasting, larger-than-life happiness. And this may be slightly different for each person, but it does seem to include authenticity, a non-clinging, and the ability to explore and express each of our higher values. This is what brings the most enduring states of deep contentment and happiness. And this is where I'm pointing us tonight. When we start spending time in our authenticity, practicing non-attachment, remembering our highest values like inclusion and kindness, we're in the kinds of happiness that have the potential to set us free. And if we have friends on this path, that's even more important. We train in the ways that incline our mind towards noble thoughts and deeds. We learn to gently catch ourselves when we're gossiping or doing stinking thinking. And then we're our own best friend when we can say, whoops, don't need that, let it go. So I've said a lot tonight. We have some definitions, some ways to cultivate, and some ideas about whether happiness lasts or not. Mostly it's good to remember that some kinds of happiness are not long-lasting, and others, while they may not be as flashy, will sustain our hearts for a very long time. All these ways of happiness, these communities we've talked about, can and do overlap. And so don't feel like you have to choose one. But in this community, in this Sangha, we're so lucky to have access to sacred teachings of the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, and many, many more teachings. These are designed to point directly to the highest forms of happiness. This is exactly what they're intended to do, to end our stress and suffering, essentially to set us free from ourselves. May it be so.